everyone. My name is Alex Weishaupl. I'm an experienced designer based in New York and have been with the organization for about 13 non-consecutive years. And today I'm here to talk about the inadvertent absurdity of semi-feral AI. I've been a collector of stories of the failures, the silliness, and the occasional unexpected graces technology produces, and have found an especial passion for the stories behind what can sometimes feel like these strange pattern-seeking algorithms broadly labeled machine learning, or even more broadly in the discipline of AI. And a point of disclosure, only natural intelligence was used to author and lay out this presentation. Today's talk is about semi-feral AI, the kind that's off-kilter or otherwise maladjusted, producing strange, whether sometimes strange brilliant or strange disconcerting outputs and insights. This is not a talk that seeks to denigrate or cast aspersions on this field. To see advances in areas like GPT-3 in natural language, the advances this tech overall is bringing in areas like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, to finance, to topics as far apart as astronomy and the foundation of the universe, to day-to-day mapping and routing for moving through our built environments. Done well and with integrity, its positive impact can be felt in nearly every economic endeavor. We have live examples of AIs driving cars far more successfully than humans, taking in what seems to be an almost incalculable amount of data to determine if it's safe to step on the gas. We have AIs that can analyze medical imagery as well as a clinical pathologist. And think about that for a moment. To be certified to diagnose a diagram like you see on the screen today would require at least 24 years to train between primary and secondary school, undergraduate and graduate degrees, and a 4-year residency. And this ability was conceived, trained, and deployed well after 1996, when a new pathologist starting today would have had to begin their formal education. And once that AI is trained, it's trained. It doesn't and can scale. Well, I couldn't find an algorithm to write this particular presentation, and I did try using a number of different web demos across multiple generations to see if I could get an intelligent bot to at least give me a story arc, but to no avail, though I did get a nice insult from this demo in the form of my design work having a distinctly industrial feel. While my experiments, to a certain degree, felt like an insulting failure, AI continues to make great strides in consumer-grade content, advancing by leaps and bounds. News outlets like the BBC are using it to enrich news feeds to provide more semantic context, and publishers are increasingly using it to author significant chunks of content within certain news verticals. And from a cultural impact, it's playing and beating games. It's impressive to see AI systems in a 20-year period conquer both chess, computationally a complex game, and more recently Go, computationally a ludicrously complex game, largely because those are hard engineering challenges. But more personally, even simply trained AIs over a few hundred generations are better than me, or really probably anyone in this audience at Super Mario Bros., a foundational game of my childhood. And ML systems can easily be hacked together by someone like myself with comfort with a command line interface, but no real depth of knowledge of what their technology, the libraries, et cetera, are actually doing to dynamically generate levels that are virtually indistinguishable from ones in the original game. Whereas, just by point of reference, this is how Takashi Tezuka and team had to painstakingly work on each original level in the early 1980s. Graph paper, colored markers, and some whiteout. And today, we see a 4X game like StarCraft fall, a game that probably dinged my GPA in a non-trivial way when it was originally released. But I want to come back to, this is not a talk about AI done well. It's also not a talk about the consequences of where this technology is going, at least not directly. Though predictions run an amazing gamut, from the unbound optimism and promise of we're going to be funnier and maybe even sexier, to the doom of a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization. And just some background said by Ray Kurzweil, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk, just if you wanted to have some names to those quotes. No, this talk, the bulk of it at least, is about semi-feral AI. And a call to action for us creators. My journey with ferility, at least in the AI space, started with the phrase chocolate pickle sauce a few years ago, a phrase I encountered on a blog entry of AI-generated recipe titles. Chocolate pickle sauce made of all Fog Day cream, cheese friends, and oven meat. Yum. When you take a data set, let's call it 30 megs of recipes, and use them as your training source, in just a few hundred generations, you can get things that start to take the form of real recipes, real ingredients, and directions. And don't crock-pot, cold water, chest soup, and artichoke gelatin dogs sound appetizing? And 1 cup of meat or flour? Talk about substitutions. This all exists in that absurd, one might even call kind of akin to an uncanny valley, where things have the form of what humans would write, but not the meaning. Though I will say that it can get legitimately and almost intentionally funny to see what a system can create when you cross those recipes with, for example, the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft. I can only hope this presentation spreads upwards from the noisome great ones. I will say, though, jokes, at least as far as I've seen, are not good. At least not yet, from what I've been able to research and from what I've been able to tinker with. Though I did find one I'll leave here that slays, at least amongst the 5-year-old set. Do it with me. Knock, knock. Alec. Alec knock, knock jokes. Try it. Your audience will raffle. You can get some inadvertently profound proverbs when you start with a data set of, let's call it 2,000 ancient ones. Almost poetry magnet level of profound. I'm pretty sure a good excuse is as good as a rest, I think has a truth embedded within it that I'll carry forward with me. And there's no smoke without the best sin, I think is likely hinting at something illicit, but something that sounds awfully fun. Some great Valentine's Day candies. Phrases can emerge from feral algorithms too, from the pick-uppy your babe or love bot to the more menacing, but maybe in a fun Dracula way, Fang, to one that might be appealing to this organization, You Hack, and one that I can't help but smile at, Stank Love. You can also get some truly inspired metal band names if you feed it enough to start. All of this so far, fun experiments. Undertrained ML systems with poor quality data or poor volumes of data, where the purpose was to try things out in a consequence-free environment. And that's awesome. And hopefully for the audience here, a few of these were giggle-worthy for you. But what happens when these experiments move from the rec room and hobby projects to being things that go in market? The example, in my mind, of feral AI in the wild, and the example, frankly, that most people mentioned when I said the title to this talk out loud, was Tay, a chatbot created by Microsoft and unleashed on Twitter in 2016. Well-intentioned, smart researchers and developers built this and thought, I know, I'll let it learn from live interactions with the internet unmonitored. Big mistake. On-screen is a safer work result. I'd recommend not searching for Tay examples on your work computer. They get dark quick. If you've ever worked with a colleague named Alexa, you've likely experienced the pain Amazon created around their name. There's a great story from about 2 years ago where a family started getting Amazon deliveries they didn't expect, only to find out their 6-year-old had figured out how to order through the Alexa speaker. And you might think, that's Actually not that hard an engineering problem to solve. That could be solved by better quality voice recognition, maybe say to ignore orders from kids, or some other kind of technical parameter to avoid that kind of consequence. And when a San Diego news anchor said at the end of their story about this incident, I love the little girl saying, "Alexa, order me a dollhouse." Echo owners who were watching the broadcast found the remark triggered orders on their own device. Ingenious implementation of NLP, wonderfully absurd real-world result. There's the recent case of Face-to-Pixelizer, announced a few months ago, which searches the outputs of a generative model, here StyleGAN, for high-resolution images that are perceptually realistic and downscale correctly to that original downscaled image. It feels like something that was ripped right out of sci-fi, and just a really super cool proof of concept with underlying code that you could grab and do something with. Except within a few hours, people noticed that sample that was out there, when they started to put some low-resolution pictures through it, resulted in what we might call unexpected outcomes, particularly if those low-resolution pictures weren't of white people. Barack Obama became white, as did a local American politician, AOC, and many celebrities of color, which is a problem given that most of the world isn't, white. More feral, maybe a little less absurd, and I promise this is not to pick exclusively on Amazon, but they did spend 5 years working on a system to automate reviewing applicants' resumes to aid in the search for top talent, a key concern of all technology firms, including our own. The problem? Using the training set of data from top performers they had on staff, Amazon's systems taught itself, in essence, that male candidates were preferable, or that female candidates, whether explicitly through knowing gender or implicitly through associations, skills, etc., in effect, making decisions about employment and livelihood that humans might consider amoral or, in certain jurisdictions, illegal. One recent study sought to understand what role algorithmic discrimination played in consumer lending amongst fintech services. And it was wonderful that it's less than more human-based systems. Importantly, less, but not absent. And to have that discrimination built into automated systems makes it unavoidably structural, biasing decisions that reward one population and punish another based on non-determinative criteria. And these examples are from organizations and researchers that I consider to be largely moral and will adjust or cancel programs when they veer too far off course, if only to protect their reputation or because they're receptive to public shame. But what happens when potentially unethical business models are built on this technology? One of the clearest, the best word I can use is skeevy examples from recent memory is Clearview.ai, built on a data set of pictures and metadata collected from the public internet, so the founder says, to create a product that is sold to law enforcement to enable searches for identities unbound by any legal constraints. This is yet another true life, in my mind, example of a semi-feral AI. Not because it has a poor data set or poor training. By all accounts, both appear to be quite impressive and effective, but because the intention behind the creation is ethically gray. It's all too easy to imagine some dark timelines built atop that technology. And a refrain to that might be, AIs don't go feral, people go feral. And whether or not that was running through your head, I do think that that's a fair and important point. We can't attribute motivation or intent, benevolence or malice to an AI-based system. And that is still the reserve of those of us who strategize, who design, who engineer and launch, who create ultimately these great, powerful, sometimes absurd or scary things. We're not going to get away from a world of unintended consequences, what I would label the semi-feral part, but we can do better as creators to ensure what we create doesn't cause harm. Because as we talked about at the very start of this talk, my time here is not to denigrate this field of AI or to scaremonger. To see advances and impact that can be felt in nearly every economic and social endeavor is awesome. And I use that word very specifically in that it inspires awe. And we as creators at Publicis Sapient have the opportunity to ensure that the awe we aspire to create is a welcome awe, not a frightening one. Because absent an altruistic motive to actively create ethical boundaries in our creations, it's easy to imagine something like this AI-based fighter jet eventually learning ways to win that humans might label war crimes. The notion of a public ethical framework for one's craft is not new. While modern medicine has moved beyond the specific formulation of Hippocrates' original text from 2,500 years ago, the underlying notion that medicine needed a common set of ethics to create trustworthiness that a physician's intent was sound and consistent is a philosophy that carries through to this day. We trust physicians because, regardless of their school, their age, their location, their specialty, etc., we know a doctor is committed first and foremost to do no harm. So what is our ethical commitment? Right now, there is no common set of morals we rally around as an articulation of our responsibility. I think there is an opportunity for us as digital creators to rally around our version of a Hippocratic oath. This is not a call to action for a digital technology oath broadly, but for the application of AI specifically, because the power to seek out, recognize, and make decisions in patterns, ultimately absent of human intervention, is a rather different thing from the outcomes of things like value pool analysis, wireframes, prototypes, or procedural or object-oriented code. And as much as I'd like to stand here and say that it were, this is not an original notion. Not too long ago, two Microsoft executives, Brad Smith and Harry Shum, proposed a Hippocratic oath for AI, but I would argue it's rather wordy, flowery, and doesn't feel very actionable. It starts, I swear to fulfill to the best of my ability and judgment this covenant. I will respect the hard-won scientific gains of those scientists and engineers in whose steps I walk, and gladly share such knowledge as is mine with those who follow. Let me skip a few lines. I will remember that there is an art to AI as well as a science, and that human concerns outweigh technological ones, and on and on. It goes on for pages. So this is my start to move us towards a simple AI oath. And I say a start. But I think that there's something here that hopefully can become a seed to build upon. It starts, I will aim to have my algorithms work in service of, not use as a tool against its intended audience. I will devote as much time to the ethical architecture of my creation, questions such as, should I do this, as I will to the technical architecture, can I do this? I will work to root out my own biases, both those I am conscious of, but maybe even more importantly, those I'm not conscious of yet, as I expect what I create, my algorithm, will embody the biases I keep. I will do more than ensure my data is properly sourced. I will confirm that the audience is content with the knowledge upon which I am building. And finally, I will seek out the counsel of others to help me imagine where I could have erred. I will fully admit it's an incomplete oath, but hopefully a start that might bind us as creators in a clear articulation of the responsibility we take on in bringing life to these tools. But it's not done, and it won't be done by me alone. If you've got comments, criticisms, additions, riffs, or just interest in this topic and think it deserves to become a more useful tool, please reach out. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether that's in the chat that's about to open up or afterwards. There's my email address. Please do reach out. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of the conference. I'll see you guys for a while.